So as I mentioned, we're going to go now and do 2 more rounds with the others. I'll slow things down a little bit more. There's always a happy medium, supposedly, between the people who do it really quickly and the people who need a little more time. So I try to feel what that is, and there's usually somebody who falls off on either side, So as I mentioned, the mental and the causal elementals are sometimes a little more challenging to perceive or to move, simply because they're subtler. They're from a higher level of being. So if you're seeing light or smoke or not seeing anything, that doesn't mean they're not there. And if you've got a guide of some kind to work with you, have the guide manage the elemental. And or if it's an indefinable thing like smoke or fog, try to contain it in a crystal sphere, like you can imagine that it's inside a crystal sphere, and then you can just move that over to the other side. And sometimes once it's in the unlimited self side, it will show up as a being. And one other thing to tell you, which I didn't mention earlier, it didn't come up with anybody's experience. Sometimes they'll completely disappear into the landscape, and that's actually the best possible outcome, because what that means is it's really aligned. You can still talk to it, but it'll feel like it just becomes one with the unlimited self. And that doesn't show up a lot in my classes, but it's something that is a phenomenon I've noticed before. So, are we ready? Let's turn our attention inward once again. Have our eyes closed. Take a breath in. And once again, summon up the image of your witness platform. And if it doesn't come up easily, don't fuss with it. Part of you knows what it is. It's a state of emotional neutrality. Just feel the emotional neutrality, and the imagery might be easier to establish. If you're feeling anxious about not having the imagery of your witness platform, it's sort of like one of those situations we sometimes encounter in the spiritual life where you have to learn, for example, how to stop judging yourself for judging yourself while you're judging yourself. So, see your witness platform. See yourself on the witness platform. Feel the emotional neutrality of the witness platform. And then look out towards the limited self landscape on the left side. And here again, you know what it feels like to be limited. If you don't have a clear image of the limited self landscape, just know that there is that unrestful part of yourself over there. And turn your attention towards it. Ask it to show itself in form if it's not showing up easily once you get that feeling of limitation, or use the image that you're familiar with from before. And then ask for an image of your mental elemental to show up in this limited self landscape. The part that can be overbearing, bigoted, a monologuist, or withdraw from people and be involved with gadgets or the internet or a cell phone or something like that. And once you have an image or a feeling that represents this mental elemental, spinning is an especially good image, or some being that spins, just as an example. Go ahead and step into the limited self landscape. Get near this vortex or being that represents your mental elemental. Notice how you feel when you're near it. And when you're ready, see about getting it over into the unlimited self landscape. Invite it, take it by the hand, ask it if it would move, bring in a guide if you need some extra help. And once again, when it's in the unlimited self landscape, how does it change? And then ask it to give you some task, activity, image, or word that will help you keep it over here, aligned with your unlimited self. Come back to your witness platform, leaving your mental elemental in the unlimited self landscape. If you want to take a moment to make a couple notes, go ahead. If you need a little more time to catch up, I'll just wait. And then when you're ready, let's do one last round for the causal or soul elemental. You're on your witness platform. You're looking toward the limited self landscape. There's an image there that represents your soul, but also some limitation, some heaviness, lack of purpose, and so on in your soul elemental, causal elemental. Step off the witness platform into your limited self landscape. Get near this elemental. Notice what it feels like to be near it. When you're ready, see if you can guide it over to the unlimited self side and notice how it changes. And ask it what it needs from you in order to stay in this landscape. When you're ready, come back to the witness platform. Make notes if you wish, or take this time to get caught up. Open your eyes when you're ready, and we can do some sharing.
Well, I made it through both sections this time. Yay.
Okay, good.
For the first one, when I looked to my desert with palm tree, there was a gigantic spider. I'm talking like the big heavy bottom and the black top and the legs, like the ones you find in Halloween hanging around all over the place, one of those. And then when you mentioned about the swirling thing, there was a, what do you call this, the tornado coming behind it, and almost like they were blending together. And there was no way I was going to go out and reach that spider. Forget it. It was poisonous, not happening. But I did grab the tornado, and so both of them came across and went over to the right side into the mountain. And as soon as the spider got to the mountain, which is freezing cold, wonderful, lovely snow, it shrunk to about a dot. I didn't think spiders lived in freezing cold weather, but that's what happened. But the tornado shrunk to about the size of my nail, but it was still spinning. It was small. And then for the last one, for the, the causal body? Mm-hmm. I went over to the desert, which was I've forgotten the word now.
Limited self.
The limited self. I saw my father. I took his hand, and we walked over to the mountain. And when he got to the mountain, he turned into this beautiful angel that reminds me of the Wizard of Oz when the good fairy comes in the ball and she appears. Okay, but this one, She looked like that, but she had wings. And when I asked, "What do you want from me?" all she said was total surrender.
Okay.
So that was a nice experience.
It sounds from your voice like that one especially moved you. Is that true? So, again, it's only imagery, but it has a direct effect on consciousness to do these things. And sometimes we'll understand what that is or what it means, and sometimes we have to ponder it a bit. I'm a little amused by the fact that you could handle a tornado but not a spider.
I have been afraid of spiders since I was extremely small, and I don't care what size or color or shape they are. My daughter has inherited that same thing, and I know that Vic Houchin worked with her for 3 hours to reduce her fear of spiders, but mine is still pretty high.
Okay.
So I can't tell you why. Oh, I can, because when I was small, I went to a movie, and there's a giant spider that ran across the lens of the... I'm finding this out later on, but the bottom line was that the projector, a spider literally crossed the projector, and of course it came onto the screen, and what was going on in the movie at the time was that a little girl was sleeping.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and this spider, of course, was not in the movie, but on the lens, came across and stopped right on top of her. And that's how, when I was a very little girl, went to see this film with my mother, and that's what came out, and it was all over the screen, so I've been sorry.
So the one thing I want to add is there's a lesson in what happened to the spider and the tornado. In the unlimited self, they were reduced in size. And what that suggests is when the mental elemental is out of alignment, it tends to blow things up into enormous proportions. And if you ever find yourself doing something like that, here's a set of images that you can use to kind of calm it down a little bit. Take those images or whatever shows up in your limited self in the mental body and then move it over to the unlimited self and just watch it shrink.
Okay, so my mental elemental was a bunch of geometric figures transforming into each other, just sort of a dynamic triangle, square, turning into other things. And when I took it to the unlimited side, it stayed the same. And then for my causal body, it was more like space. And when I took it to the unlimited side, it became bigger space.
Sometimes in the classes that I teach, we do a practice where we call in energy hands that represent a higher level of our being, and then we use those energy hands to move through the different layers of the energy field, each one of which corresponds to one of our bodies. And I've often found that when people do that practice, the body that shows up as space is the one that they're either working on or comfortable with. It's like what they say in Star Trek, where no man has gone before and searching and exploring. It's like the leading edge or horizon of someone's growth at the present moment. And so I haven't had that kind of thing show up before in this practice, but it does sometimes happen that you'll get imagery that indicates that an elemental is not out of alignment, and to have it be the same thing on both sides suggests to me that that's your experience. People who have a long time meditative practice have probably aligned their elementals already, and this is just another way of doing that. However, it was interesting, those two levels in alignment and the other two needing a little bit of work, just some information to take forward.
This time I envisioned a medieval knight in armor, and when he's going through the limited area, which was the rubbish heap, he was very disdainful of it. Just walking through, kicking garbage around, very disdainful. So then when I brought him over to the unlimited side, which was the treasure house, he felt compelled to take off his armor. There was no need for it. And his basic thought to me was, the open hand is the armed hand. So in other words, security through apparent defenselessness.
Right, yeah, good. That doesn't need any particular explanation, I don't think. I think it's very clear. Did you want to share about your causal?
Nothing on the causal.
Okay.
I'm still building it.
Okay, yeah, actually, it's hard. I mean, typically either the mental or the causal body will be one that won't show up because it's harder to grasp than the others. But doing the practice on a regular basis, eventually it does show up. So there was something that I wanted. Oh yeah, the mental body, I talked about likes and dislikes, and that's kind of the basis of judging things. And it's a problem for everybody in our society not to be judgmental. So I liked that yours came out so boldly, so to speak, and disdaining the material world and all the garbage and rubbish and so on, and then, having a lesson about maybe not really needing to protect oneself so much from that, to make sure that you're open to all the quality experience that's out there, too.
Yes, I had the same image for the mental, a knight covered in metallic armor. Mm-hmm. But the sense of it was more of restriction, or unable to share or unable to be seen, whatever was inside of it. So we walked to the other side, and it dissolved. The armor dissolved, but it became almost like a protective pair of wings to the being who's standing on the mountain.
Okay. And that being was there from the beginning.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I think that's the quality of devotion. You know, wanting to be of service to a higher level of being. You know, the wings, in a sense, are the action quality. The higher being is stationary, and somehow, if it can fly, it can move, it can spread. And I think that's probably a message about not hiding from the opportunity to share and teach what you know. Letting it be spread out, and through a devotion to a higher level of being. Not being afraid that it would be perceived as arrogant, for example, to sit up in front of people and teach. Something like that.
And the Causal came up as the similar figure than the one that is standing on the mountain, but instead of being golden, it was white and pale. It was when I came closer, it was very human and warm. And as we walked to the other side, first it dissolved, but then it came up as very colorful, like with all the colors of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think the real message in that one was in the mental body. The other is another reflection of that. Being all that you are, showing all that you are, shining in all the ways that you have to shine, those kinds of things. Remember that what I said earlier about the causal elemental is that it goes out of alignment when it feels like it doesn't have a purpose. And what it does is useless, or what you try to do doesn't create any particular change. I mean, this is typical for everyone. So what you're seeing in all the colors of the rainbow is there's a vibrant, alive purpose that gives color to all of your life. And when that elemental is aligned, you can live from that. And when you're in a place, or when anyone is in a place of life starts to seem gray and heavy and all the same all the time, it's because somehow that higher purpose isn't having a chance to come out. And then you have to look for a place for it to come out. I hope that helps.
For mine, it really helped me to remember what you said about having a sense of humor about these things. For the mental one, it was like a group or a gathering of monkeys, and I was thinking maybe this is the monkey mind,
Absolutely,
or something like that.
Yeah,
and they all just kind of herded over on their own to the unlimited self. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I said, you have to have a sense of humor about this kind of thing. And for the causal body, I also had a giant spider, but I wasn't afraid of my giant spider, but it moved over to the unlimited self, and it sort of crystallized as a statue, but it stayed the same size. And
it was still a spider, or it was a crystal?
It was like a spider statue, of like a crystallized spider statue.
Okay.
But I wasn't afraid of it. I didn't feel like it was ugly or bad in any way. And both of them said the same thing when I asked what they wanted from me, and they essentially said, "Get out of the way." And that's it, just to get out of the way.
Does anybody remember the Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers? Yeah. There's that one scene where he says, Menki, get that Menki out of here. Don't you know it's against the law to have a Menki without a licence? I love that part. But I mean, think about that in relation to monkey mind. You know, it's a moment of superior wisdom. Get the monkey out of here. It's against the law. They have a monkey without a license. A monkey mind without a license.
So, my mental elemental was a giant brain with spindly arms and legs. and when I walked over close to it, it felt very familiar. There's a piece of me that is, I mean, I've been working on this for years, but there is a piece of me that is fully capable of being an arrogant know-it-all. And there it was. And it didn't want to go to the unlimited side until I said, but you'll learn more. And it was willing to walk over there with me. And then it transformed, it shrunk, and it became just part of a person, a transparent person, a transparent human figure. And when I asked what it needed, the answer was to do the work that I've been trying to do for a while, and now finally feel like I have the time and space to actually start doing. I need to devote, like every day I need to devote some time to that. And the causal image was just wind. I mean, I couldn't see it, I could just see wind. But it was willing to come into a sphere and be carried over. And then it became this white-robed human figure. And what it needs from me is a lot more meditative practice. So that was very interesting.
That seems pretty clear. And, you know, I often find when we have time to do practices like this in a somewhat more leisurely way, like we're doing today, that over the course of a day, people's inner senses get clearer and clearer. So while I would have expected that it would have been harder for the mental and the causal elementals because they're more subtle, you actually had a much clearer experience that you were able to interpret on your own. So, you know, there's been some movement since the earlier part of the afternoon.
Like my previous brethren and sisters has spoken about the monkey mind and, you know, my tendencies on the limited mind mental plane is racing and compulsive reading, like some brothers on to my left here that read, and study, and constant wanting more and more knowledge, and so that fixation of more on the mental plane goes on and on and on, racing. When I cross over to the unlimited side, what's asking for me is to just get centered, let it in, let it congeal and it integrate, let insight come, be more trusting, and let it come together. And then compassion comes together, share more, you know, come together and be of service out of compassion and be helpful. As you were saying something about meaning, you know, let that come together as a meaningful expression out of the integration. So on the mental plane, which I'm doing more of, so that came together. On the causal plane, there was an awareness of a lot of nebulousness coming together. That the soul, when my soul feels kind of like with all this gathering of experience and spaciousness, a kind of a nebulousness, but comes out of that is a lot of doubt and wonder from a kind of like a wonder from a sense of doubt kind of quality, like kind of a fear quality when I'm in the limited self, like where's this all going, lack of meaning, not sure when I'm in that limited self on the causal plane. But then when I shift over to the unlimited self, what's asked of me is to stay, what's asked me, and get connected, open to meaning, get grounded, have a sense of wonder. And then that starts to break open. And then the pairs of opposites seem to disappear. That like, dislike, all that kind of stuff just disappears. And as my friend over here, that non-dual thing just disappears. All that back and forth seems to go away when I'm in the unlimited self. So,
The dual stuff goes away,
yeah,
is what you mean.
that dual
Yeah.
stuff just drops away. So,
Okay. Sounds like if I had to give a name to the last part that you were talking about, it's move from wondering to having wonder. So,
yeah.
or I'm reminded also of something that the great poet Rilke said in his book Letters to a Young Poet, which was, live the questions. I love that.
So from the platform, I went over to the limited self, and it was still dark and swampy and mucky, and I sort of paused and waited, and all of a sudden a white unicorn appeared. And it seemed pretty happy, and we kind of touched, and you pet horses and things, and we walked together over the other side, and it was just sort of blissful. And then on the causal soul level, in the dark deepness, it took a little while, but it was a kind of a misty, windy ball. Put it in the sphere, and it came with me, and didn't merge exactly, but it was happy being in the light, in and around the light. All very positive.
Okay. I never thought of a unicorn in this way before, but in the context that you're talking about, I can see the horn as a symbol of one-pointed mind. I mean, almost literally, because the horn growing out of the head and, in a sense, being an extension of the third eye and being a unicorn, so that's one point. Just an interesting thing to think about. And the fact that it was the same on both sides means that that elemental was not a problem, already aligned. So that's a good thing. And then, the whole idea of what our life purpose is often obscure to us. But we can learn about it by having it in the unlimited self, because on that side, all of us is more receptive to guidance of various kinds. In a sense, it's the tension between the soul and the elementals in us that creates all the noise and spinning that keeps the guidance out. So one of the values of doing a practice like this and getting the elementals lined up is we're just more open on all the different levels for being supported and guided in whatever work we're doing. Okay.
So now you're talking here about aligning the elementals. And I remember last year when you spoke about the chakras, you said something about that the fact that aligning the chakras wasn't something correct. The term aligning the chakras wasn't necessarily correct. Am I right with that? And how do you see that difference?
Okay. So aligning the elementals in this case means that wherever they happen to be on the spectrum between the limited self and the unlimited self, you end up on the other side of the practice with them all on the unlimited self side. They're lined up on that side. And in a sense, you can also say that as support beings that are supporting you, they're lined up under you. You know, each level of your being is supporting the next higher level of your being. They go out of alignment when there's a trauma or overexcitement or something like that in one of the elementals that then starts to spread to the others. And for some people, it starts in the mental body and then works its way down. For some people, it starts in the causal body with a feeling of lack of purpose. Now, with chakra alignment, that is a term that energy healers use with very specific ideas of what's involved. And the comment that I made was intended to unplug people from that particular way of looking at things and have a more open perspective. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the idea of aligning the chakras is in any way incorrect, but there are many ways that you can get the chakras to move towards the highest realization of their function. And if you're only aligning them, you may not be doing that. You may not be pointing them towards the highest realization of their function. So in the practices I was teaching last time I was here, we use energy hands and we explore the chakras and we work with their size and their shape and their color and a feeling that there's energy moving in them. And using the colors of the spectrum, we're pointing each one towards its highest realization. And there may be work to do before it actually gets there, but the intention is there to keep supporting what we're doing. Sometimes people will describe to me that one of their chakras is off center, off to the left or off to the right or forward or backward. I would talk about alignment in a situation like that. But the idea of each chakra needs an alignment of some kind, yeah, that's a good kind of tune-up, but it gets them functional at whatever level they were already operating at. It doesn't necessarily point them towards their highest realization. It could if that's the intention of the energy healer, but I think maybe when it's used in the same way as I'm talking about the chakras, what it means is that they're all functioning together, you know, some kind of cohesive system. I think that, yeah, it's probably similar, but a lot of times what I want to do when I'm teaching people these techniques is try to make sure that through using a particular language and their concept of what the language means, they're not missing other kinds of work they could be doing. So I want to end with a meditation, which I'll talk about in a moment. The meditation uses some music, but it'll help if I give you a little background beforehand. There's a very little visualization that goes along, and what I especially would like for you to notice is at the end of the meditation how the energy in the room feels. Now, the music is music that I feel touches the highest of the musical centers that we can reach, and so it's designed to hold us in a place of unity consciousness. So as a result of the work that we've done aligning our elementals, to go into a practice like this that then deals with unity consciousness could create a really wonderful resonance in the room, something that we don't often have an opportunity to experience, to be in a room full of even one or two people where their elementals are aligned and there's also an opening to some experience of unity consciousness. So the practice I call being held in the hands of your highest self. And the word monad, which you sometimes encounter in Theosophical literature, is for me the highest self. It's not easy from reading Theosophical literature to get a clear idea of what a monad is. I think Blavatsky uses it in several different ways. But I think what's consistent about all of the ways that she uses it is she means a unit. Technically, the word monad means one and undivided. But you'll sometimes see her say astral monad. But then she might say something about a higher monad than that. So how can you be indivisible and then there be a higher level of indivisibility? So I think we have to think about the idea of monad as being the principle of unifying some division in consciousness. But then Leadbeater and Besant used it in a slightly different way to talk about the highest level of our being, the one that we evolve from. And that exists also in Blavatsky, but gets a little confusing or diluted because of all of the other ways that she talks about it. So in the Theosophical teachings about the 7 principles, you'll sometimes see the principle of Atma, which is the highest self, described as the monad. And then you'll sometimes see Atma Buddhi described as the monad. So that's the highest spiritual principle and the principle of intuition. And then you'll sometimes see Atma Buddhi Manas described as the monad. And then all bets are off about whether you're going to understand and be able to use the concept. But if we think of it as unifying divides in consciousness, then it starts to make sense. Now, I've only mentioned all of this because I know a lot of you have been exposed to the idea of the monad. And what I want to make clear is the level of being that we align with in this practice, or that I intend for us to align with, is a level that supposedly in Blavatsky is said to be not accessible in our current evolutionary cycle. And in terms of embodying that, being in a human body and living from that, I think that's probably a true statement. But that doesn't mean we can't have an experience of some touch of that level of consciousness. And in Leadbeater's book, The Monad, he actually describes something that he thought was a momentary glimpse of the monadic consciousness. And it's worth looking into that book if you want to know more about where I'm coming from when I'm talking about the monad here. So in my groups, we started working with energy hands that we would often visualize as being just large enough to rest on the top of the head or to rest on the shoulders. And we always worked with them as an expression of a higher level of our being that knew or knows more than we do. And then at a certain point, another much larger set of energy hands showed up that were capable of completely surrounding us. And so in order to understand the relationship between the lower energy hands and the higher energy hands, I had to do some thinking about how it might plug in to the Theosophical system. And that led me to think about how you're supposed to unify your consciousness level by level as you're, ascending the path of evolution back to the logos or the source. So Leadbeater will talk about unifying physical and astral consciousness. And then another level is unifying those 2 plus mental consciousness. And then those 3 plus causal consciousness. If you've actually succeeded in unifying all the way up to causal consciousness, you would be perfectly identified with your soul. But most of us think of the soul as the self that's guiding us. So what guides us after that, if we're one with our soul? So I found some teachings in Besant's writings in particular, where she said that if your level of consciousness is mostly coming from the causal level, what happens then is the monad steps in to take the place of the soul. And it's almost like you're on a path operating at a higher octave. So we've got 4 notes, so to speak, in the chord when we're first working on developing ourselves, physical, astral, mental, causal. And then if we're working from the causal level, flipping up to the next higher octave, the causal level is the lowest level, and then Buddhic, nirvanic, monadic. And the monadic level takes the place of our soul. Now, I'm not talking about this so much in the connection of where am I in all of this, or where are you, or what does this mean about a level of spiritual development, or a step we're working on, or a spiritual status. What I'm talking about is having some kind of relationship with a self that is quite a bit beyond what we think of as our soul. If you think about it, the way most people consider a soul is something along the lines, I won't say most people who are on a spiritual path. It's about your life purpose. But your life purpose could be a limitation too. It's a kind of self-definition. What if there was a higher level that we were operating from that transcended, for example, being human? Not to become inhuman, but somehow to become, a higher expression of unity consciousness. So the experiment that I made in my classes when these higher energy hands came up was to develop a practice that would kind of hold the space for us and to provide us with a feeling of support from this highest level of being. And what became clear from these experiments was that level of being only considers experience and what we learn from it. It's beyond what we normally consider as good and evil. It's beyond any kind of duality in that sense, of judging experience. And to be in touch with that level of being through a practice like this and to be held in it with the music creates a feeling of what it's like to be free of the tendency to judge ourselves and other people. And to recognize that we all have different paths back to the source, and in effect, our monad, which is also related to some teachings about the 7 rays and so on, that's our personal path. Other people may not be on that path. It's a path where whatever we learn, however we experience things, whatever flavor of consciousness or soul we are, is good, is real, is whole, is equal in its value to any of the other paths, even though those paths are different from ours. So I often move from the centering practice that we did this morning. Maybe I won't do the aligning the elementals practice. That's like something to do maybe once a week or something like that. But you can constantly refresh your experience of being in touch with this higher level. And the words that I'll use when I'm leading you through it are some things that can open up your thinking and your feeling and your spiritual side to that sense of being beyond the judgments and that particular kind of duality where we're always dealing with something in its opposite. So again, there's the theoretical part. I'll explain the practice in a minute. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay. So the first thing is, as I mentioned, we'll be using what I call higher energy hands, hands that represent the monadic level of being. Some people will perceive them as very large hands, like hands that will envelop you. Some people might see them as wings. And my understanding is that if you perceive them as wings, it's almost as if the feathers were fingers, and that it means that you're open to being touched in a lot more ways than you might be touched by hands with an ordinary number of fingers. That doesn't mean you should try to get the feathers instead of the hands. It just means they might show up that way. Another thing is they can show up like this, sort of in a prayer position with you in between, or they can show up as a support underneath you, or they can show up as surrounding and embracing you, or they can show up like this. And I think when they show up like this, there's some male-female polarity that's being balanced in that way. Now, The practices don't come with instruction manuals. They sort of evolve, and you kind of try them out, and then you learn as you go. So you might experience things that are different from what I'm describing, or something like what I'm describing. So once we have this experience of being held by the energy hands, I'll lead you through a couple of stages where I'll ask you to feel certain things or to notice certain things. And then at a certain point, I'll give a signal to Karen, who will hopefully be able to do this practice with her eyes open, to turn the music on so that we can sustain that feeling. The thing is, if you're just doing it with imagery, you can revert back to the mind and you'll start wandering off thinking about things. Any questions about this before we go into our meditation? So this is the meditation called being held in the hands of your highest self. Have your eyes closed, your attention focused inward. And take a deep breath in and let it out as we did before, just letting your body, mind system know that you're about to begin meditation. And do it once again, big breath in, big breath out. So ask for or imagine the presence of higher energy hands. Hands that come from the monadic level of being, one step away from God consciousness. Feel that these energy hands, which are larger than you are supporting you, surrounding you, embracing you, cupping or cradling you, whatever feels right. And know that these hands come from a level of being that's beyond good and evil, beyond judgment of any kind. Experience is just what you've learned from it, whether it was in joy or in suffering. And as you're held by these energy hands, first feel a sense that you're home, to be held by the hands of your higher self, the monad, is to have the experience of coming home to yourself. And with that feeling of coming home, there's a sense of relaxing and safety. The next phase is notice through that feeling of home and safety, there's also a sense of opening, more energy from your highest self is available to you, coming in through the touch of these energy hands, everywhere where they're reaching and supporting you. And along with that energy comes a sense of being revitalized. So there's both a feeling of rest and a feeling of being revitalized. And along with that energy coming from the highest self, there's also a feeling that it carries with it a lot of wisdom, and that you're opening to receive that wisdom, even if you don't know precisely what it is. There's a sense of illumination, rising sense of illumination within yourself as you receive this energy, this wisdom. From this energy and wisdom comes the possibility of understanding yourself in relation to others. All beings are on a path back to the source. All beings have different paths. Some beings get in their own way. Maybe you sometimes get in your own way. Sometimes it seems that other beings are getting in your way, or you're getting in the way of other beings. And yet it's all a journey back to the source. From this understanding comes the possibility of forgiveness. Forgiveness of yourself and others, all beings, for the fact that you're all on a journey back to the source, and you sometimes get in each other's way. From this understanding and forgiveness, supported, being held by these higher energy hands, it's possible to experience inner peace. Bask now for a while in that experience of inner peace. So take a moment to notice the feeling of the energy in the room. A result of the work that we've done today, aligning our elementals, getting in touch with and being held by our highest self. And then take a moment to offer some deep, heartfelt gratitude for these energy hands or wings that represent your highest self, for coming and supporting you in this practice. And say goodbye to these energy hands or wings for now, knowing you can call on them whenever needed. And then take a moment to visualize your witness platform once again. See the witness platform, see yourself on the witness platform. And then let go of that witness platform imagery and be fully present in ordinary waking consciousness in the physical body, on the physical plane, here in this room, doing whatever you need to do to complete the process of return, stretching, yawning, sighing, rubbing your hands or your forearms or your thighs if you need to bring yourself fully back into the body. Opening your eyes when you're ready. So we have about 10 minutes left for questions or comments or clarifications, or if anybody wants to share some part of their experience.
What was the significance of the feathers again?
The feathers just means more points of contact. People are open to different degrees from the relationship that they have with their higher self. Souls that have done a lot of work on themselves will probably feel that there are more contact points. I find that some people, even advanced souls, may be carrying a lot of a feeling of unworthiness or shame with them, and then it's sometimes hard for them to have a relationship with that level because they need to be open to the idea that from that level there's nothing to be ashamed about. But there's a lot of religious conditioning that people carry that can create a barrier. Anybody else? Okay, so we're going to close now, and I think this CD actually does have that thing that you sometimes see on New Age CDs about not operating heavy equipment while you're listening to it. You might want to just take a little walk around the grounds or something before you get in your car and drive home, or face your family, or whatever the next stage is. Carry that with you, and be grateful for the wonderful nature that surrounds us, and whatever devas may be out there wanting to say hello and so on. And thank you very much for your attention today. It's been a very wonderful group because of you were also participatory. So thank you.